God fucking kidding. Like,
I forgot the acronym to it.
fuck.
It's like AU, US, UK, or something like that. So that, we're starting new security pacts to try to counter China. And we want to keep Europe in our good graces. We don't want them to be hesitant to join in because Russia and China are friends now. So if we try to pick a fight with China, Europe is also going to be a bit reluctant because Europe is going to say, hey, that's a proxy.
Oh, wow.
That is what the United States is worried about with this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's what it boils down to. There's not really any money lost or gained for the U.S.
This.
It's not really about that. It's really more
This.
about keeping Europe in our fold. So everything has been done to try to stop this pipeline. Now, Biden went ahead and lifted sanctions on this pipeline back in May. There were sanctions on it from the Trump administration and from the Obama administration. I believe the Obama, certainly from the Trump administration. Biden actually lifted sanctions on the pipeline. He said, "Well, it's complete. There's really no point in doing this in continuing to sanction it." But he did that under a pact with Germany, and that pact with Germany was, okay, we will allow you to go ahead, and now we can look back at it, which is such a scam. So we will allow you to go ahead and turn on this gas pipeline and get your energy from Russia, which, by the way, in Europe, energy costs are extremely expensive. Like
I can't.
your biggest bill in Europe is going to be your energy bills. Here in the United States, it's like rent, and then energy is, when you pay your gas bill and your power bill, those are smaller bills. In Europe, boy, your energy bill could be bigger than your actual rent or your mortgage. So he says to them, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll allow you to do this, but if Russia has any sort of active aggression, then that's it. Cut it off. You're not going to do it anymore.
I could fucking kill somebody right now.
Agreed. Germany said, okay, fine. If
Oh my
Russia
god.
does any sort of aggression against Ukraine, or I believe mostly specifically against Ukraine, then we will halt Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And sure, what happened? So now, as soon as the U.S. continued to push and claim that Ukraine was going to go into NATO, or that Ukraine was going to be joining NATO, there was a lot of this discussion, obviously, that was ruffling Russia's feathers. I think there was some probably other behind-the-scenes feather ruffling that was going on. But ultimately, we sort of pushed Russia into this spot where they felt very threatened by, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the coup. So in 2014, the U.S. essentially ousted a duly elected leader in Ukraine that was friendlier to Russia, more pro-Russia, and the United States backed a coup that deposed that president and installed a U.S. pro-Western president instead. And that happened in 2014. When that happened, a lot of Ukrainians were really pissed. They did not like their election to be meddled. They didn't like their politics, their government to be meddled with. They were very angry, and a lot of them started to rise up in sort of resistance and revolution. Civil war kind of broke out in Ukraine. That is when Russia had the opportunity to then go in and annex Crimea. Again, that was, had the U.S. not deposed this president, staged this coup, then there wouldn't have been a reason for Russia to have to go in and annex Crimea, because they're friendly with their neighbors. They weren't, so there was no real reason to do that. But when the U.S. decided to go in that direction, that's when Russia came in. And maybe Russia would have negotiated with Ukraine to get Crimea back. Crimea was this territory that was gifted to Ukraine at one point, but there's really no reason why Crimea was gifted in the first place.
It's so fucking fucked up.
It's a majority Russian-speaking area, mostly Russian ethnic people. Really bizarre thing to do. But anyway, you know how it goes with map flying. Things get carved up in weird ways. Crimea was one of those things. So maybe he would have negotiated at some point for Crimea to join back with Russia, in some sort of a financial exchange, or maybe even a land exchange. Unclear. Who knows what would have happened? Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Doesn't matter. Didn't. Instead, the president of Ukraine was deposed, a pro-Western leader was installed, and we continue to ensure that pro-Western leaders are in Ukraine, which now we have Zelensky. So that first has to be addressed. That's what happened in Ukraine. And then from there, the uprisings continued. And that is where the region of Donbass remained in civil war. They remained in the civil war with the rest of Ukraine from that 2014 coup that the United States backed. They had been fighting for 8 years for independence away from Ukraine. There were the Minsk agreements that said that they would remain an autonomous region. It was
so it's fucking
the opportunity to govern themselves, to be independent, but to
literally
remain
just
a
fucking
part of
Facebook.
Ukraine. Ukraine was supposed to,
Right?
They agreed to the Minsk agreements, right?
Okay.
They agreed to
Let's
it,
see
but
if
then they
it's
never really fulfilled it.
doing the
And their reason for
text
not
talk
fulfilling
thing.
it was because they said, wait a minute. This doesn't sound like a really good idea, because what's going to happen now is you're going to have these really pro-Russian territories that are going to have representation in our government. And we don't really want basically Putin spies. You know, the way they framed it was like, these are going to be spies for Russia, or Russian agents, Russian assets from these territories, because they're more pro-Russia, and they're going to essentially infiltrate our government and vote against things and whatnot. So they never really fully went forward with the Minsk agreement.
This is fucking retarded.
So the fighting continued between these rebels. They call them pro-Russia rebels, which I think is such an insult to say. It would be similar to calling the American colonies at the time when the revolution was going on, calling them like pro-French. They're like, oh, those pro-French Yankees, rather than Americans, right? So these are Ukrainians that are living, that are wanting to be independent from Ukraine in their little region. And so that fighting had been going on for a while, and the Minsk agreement was not really going anywhere. It stalled. They'd actually negotiated the Minsk agreement twice, and nothing really came. There was an agreement, nothing happened. So all of these events put together, and then on top of it, the U.S. not only staging a coup, deposing the government, installing the government we like, then we start to say, and now that we've got this pro-Western government, we're going to talk about NATO. We're going to talk about Ukraine joining NATO, and that would cause an obvious problem for Russia right away because of these rebel regions that are rising up and fighting, and that would be considered an issue for NATO if we would have allowed Ukraine to even join NATO. I think that had that been described to the American people, and there was an actual like being really forthcoming and saying, look, Ukraine's going to join NATO, but guess what that means? That means we're automatically going to have to go to war because they're in a civil war right now. That should disqualify them from joining NATO, but you never know. People are tricky. So this has always been the beef with Russia. It's been a beef for the last 8 years. So there's been a lot of tension happening for all of these years because of these various factors. And now with the Nord Stream 2, and this is what it all boils down to. It all boils down to this gas pipeline. I don't think it's anything else. A lot of people are saying, most people aren't even mentioning the pipeline. I'm so surprised that most people are not even, they're thinking, oh no, it's just Putin and his quest to restore the USSR, right? They're just thinking that Putin is this big warmonger that just wants to restore the USSR, the glory, and he's all about glory.
That's awesome.
And that's what it's about. It's just about this pipeline. So Russia's relying on this pipeline. The Russian people have drastically and rapidly elevated out of poverty. One of my good friends is Russian. She's American and Russian. When she was living here in America, said, I'll never go back. It's terrible. She's like, when I was a child, there were bread lines. She lived through the hell, did not want to go back. She ultimately did need to go back for a family emergency.
Not here either.
And she'd gone back to visit, but didn't live there, didn't really want to live there. Every time she went back, she just stayed with family. She didn't really explore life as a young, single Russian. So now she's living in Moscow. She says, and she won't come back to the U.S. now to live. She says, oh no, life is so much better here. She's like, I cannot believe how much better life is. We have cool restaurants, we have cool bars and clubs and great shopping, and we have a European lifestyle. So things have drastically changed for the Russian people. That has been because money has gone into the economy. A lot of that money going into the economy has to do with Nord Stream 1. Nord Stream 2 promised an even better life for the Russian people.
What the fuck, dude?
They're not interested in changing that. So when the U.S. continued to ruffle the feathers of Russia and going to get NATO right up to your borders. And remember, Russia at one point wanted to join NATO. Yeah, they talked about it, but we like to have this demonized, boogeyman, and so that's a problem for Russia. And also, there's a lot of there's other reasons why you wouldn't. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to have Russia join NATO. So I'm not advocating for that by any means. I think that would be a bad idea. Just like I think Ukraine is a bad idea. Just like I think the Baltic nations, Montenegro, bad idea. There's a lot of bad ideas inside of NATO.
Oh, you
NATO
don't
just
fucking
really
say.
at this point is a bad idea. It needs to go away, right? What's the point of it anymore? But now they're saying, see, this is why there's a point. So this is the problem with all of this, because Trump was saying, why do we need NATO? Now all of a sudden you've got Russia coming into Ukraine, and then now people are saying, see, we told you so. This is why. And for them to even have an ounce of something that makes it look like they were proven right. But here we are. So when Russia ultimately then just declared these regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, to be independent, did not annex them. A lot of people are saying that he was going to go and he was going to annex these areas. I had said all along, he has no intention to annex these regions. He wants them to remain independent. He wants that buffer zone. Then, the question then goes, well, how much of a buffer zone does he want? Because there's a lot of Ukraine, not just that area. There's a lot of Ukraine that's on the Russian border. And then it was like, well, I could certainly see a scenario, I suppose, where maybe you would go in and try to secure the border there. But I don't know. But nonetheless, he didn't actually annex those regions. He declared them independent. Declaring them independent should have just been it. Well, those areas have not been under Ukrainian control for 8 years. This could have just ended and de-escalated very quickly. Have we just said, okay, and have the United States just said, okay, and they're not going to be part of NATO. And you can give your pipeline to Europe and make money and supply, elevate the lives of the Russian people. You could do all of that. No big deal. We have to remember, Russia has been on our side of all the big wars. All the big wars. Russia's actually an ally. World War I, World War II, War on Terror. Russia has been an ally. So it's odd, that we've turned them into this kind of boogeyman. We have over communism and USSR and Korea and Vietnam and, there's these other Syria proxy wars. God. But the big wars, they've been on our side. And they took way more hits than we ever took, especially World War II. So, but we maintained this sort of hostile dialogue, kind of continued on with the Kurdistan, and now when the U.S. didn't just say, all right, fine, no NATO, all right, fine, those areas, I guess, could be independent. I mean, here we are being very, very hypocritical by saying, well, Taiwan is independent, but these areas can't be independent, right? Or, and a lot of nations are not recognized by other countries. Like Israel isn't recognized by a bunch of countries. Taiwan's not recognized by a bunch of countries. And these areas, Donetsk and Luhansk and in Donbass, are probably also, well, they're not recognized by maybe Belarus. Or, unofficially.
Fucking.
So when the U.S. then escalated and said, that's it, you're sanctioning, fine, okay. I don't think anybody really
Shut the fuck up.
Sanctioning. There was, White House says Russia invaded Ukraine, triggers off stiff sanctions.
No, forget it.
So
forget it.
They're saying that this rolling into this already independent area that has not been under the control of Ukraine for the last 8 years, they're saying that is, an invasion. Really tough to call it that. Probably shouldn't have escalated it to that point. But the big escalation beyond the sanctions was this: when Germany halted the approval of the gas pipeline of the Nord Stream 2 after Russia's actions. So the pipeline is complete. It is just being inspected by the EU and German authorities at the moment where it was, and then they were expected to turn it on at any time. And I believe that is really why the White House escalated this and pushed Russia into this corner and did a lot of stuff to them, because they were hoping to get to this point where they could ensure that this pipeline would not happen, because if they could bait Russia into an escalation, Germany has to uphold their end of the bargain when the sanctions were lifted back in May against the pipeline. But here it is: the German Chancellor announced that certification process for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was halted after the Kremlin ordered troops into eastern Ukraine, saying that the situation had fundamentally changed. Now remember, these are not troops ordered into
Okay,
you know,
4 o'clock in the
so
morning.
this
Fuck this.
escalation with this pipeline that you can see here, this is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This escalation, after this whole thing has been built, I mean, imagine how much money has been dumped into this thing to build this sucker that would go all the way from Russia to Europe under the Baltic Sea. I mean, you're talking billions and billions of dollars have been spent on this. Now they're being told it was a waste. Now they're being told, sorry you wasted your money, Russia. This sucker's not going to be turned on because you recognized these two areas of Ukraine that have not
Holy
been under
shit.
Ukrainian control for the past 8 years as independent. And now you must pay. And the way and billions of dollars lost in this pipeline. That escalation was very bad. And that suddenly, I did not think in my calculations when I was like, oh, this is so ridiculous to think that Russia's going to be invading Ukraine. Apparently, Russia suspected this was going to happen. The Biden administration certainly did.
Holy shit.
I didn't suspect that this would happen, to be quite honest. There was no way that the West would do this because it would certainly cause, it would trigger a war. And I felt that they were trying to de-escalate. That's what they kept saying to us. And there's two quick and easy ways to de-escalate this. Say, okay, Ukraine's never going to be part of NATO. And Nord Stream 2, we're not going to. You can go ahead. They could have done it to
Okay.
so that Europe doesn't get 80% of its energy from Nord Stream 2. I mean, they could have done all these things.
Nope.
But they chose no. They wanted to ensure the pipeline was going to turn on. Then I believe, now I don't know if this is true, but my co-host on Rising, Ryan Grimm, mentioned that they were threatening to even shut off or limit Nord Stream 1. I'm not 100% certain about that. I haven't looked it up. If you know, let me know in the comments. That for certain would trigger war. Russia absolutely. The money from Nord Stream 1.
This is so hard.
From Nord Stream 2 to continue
Like,
to elevate the population. So if you're going to threaten Nord Stream 1, then that is a massive, massive escalation. And then that is why several hours ago I thought, well, crap. I mean, this is a chess game. They have no other option. If you're going to threaten them with turning off all of their monetary, you know, one of their biggest financial resources, if you're going to cut them off like that, not just sanction them, but actually turn off the spigot, then they don't have any choice but to take Ukraine. And the reason is because the other way that Europe would get natural gas is through Ukraine. It's not as efficient, it's more expensive, it can't be done.
Advance.
So
Shit.
they can turn off Nord Stream 1 and they can rely on these older
Wow.
going through Ukraine. Not if Russia controls Ukraine. And then that puts Europe in a situation where Russia controls all the natural gas.
That's how long that took.
They will absolutely need
Fucking turn off the closed captions.
The calculation is Europe is going to have to acquiesce and tell the U.S. to back off and not join in. Or the other thing it could do is, I guess, trigger World War III. I guess that could happen. I mean, I guess Europe could try to fight for the gas. That's still going to be a problem. You know, I'm sure we're sitting in rooms right now discussing all this, but the gas is coming from Russia. So no matter how you slice it, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to World War III in order to take over Russia, in order to get control of the gas coming from Russia, to steal the resource? That would be a tough thing to do, and I just don't think. I don't think we would win that war. Because I don't think it would just be Russia. I think there would be maybe a lot of other players involved to ensure that Russia doesn't lose control of its own resources. But at this point, look, I guess anything could happen. I didn't think this would happen. So me sitting here saying to you, I don't think World War III is going to happen. I mean, I don't think so. But I guess anything's possible because anything can escalate. And if they just continue to escalate and escalate and escalate to that point, then I suppose, and you know what? I should have been smarter. I should have already thought about people are asking. If you can get to this sort of mindset of indifference where you may have
released the narcissist. Great, but I need to be clear with you, okay? It doesn't mean that you're going to be free of all negative emotions. And it also doesn't mean that you'll ever become indifferent to somebody's cruelty towards you. Indifference is really about no longer caring about the narcissist themselves.
Well, I've talked about Bitcoin a few times on the show, but to be honest, I've always been reluctant to deliver the case for it. Mostly because there's a lot of scammers out there. I never want to be associated with them. All I have in this business is your trust. I've never, ever wanted to take that. I also don't think it's necessarily appropriate for a guy who talks about the news and tries to be objective when delivering it to you to then be recommending something that he personally has a financial interest in. So here are my disclosures. Do not take any financial advice from me, and please remember, during this monologue, I personally have been holding Bitcoin for several years, and that does, of course, cover my life. But the reason that I am doing this today is because crypto and its world has now crossed into the news realm, what we care about on this show. And when Canada, in its violent crackdown on the Freedom Convoy protesters in the city of Ottawa, has declared full-fledged financial warfare on dissidents. Now, as Crystal has laid out here already, Canada's financial warfare includes the ability of the government to make banks start canceling loans, closing bank accounts, closing transactions of those that they suspect are protesters. It includes canceling mortgages, car loans, full-scale unbanking, akin to what we see in Communist China. And just like China, we see that war extend to the cryptocurrency world as well. A common refrain in the Bitcoin or crypto community is that money is the foundation of all power. In fact, the history of currency and money itself is fascinating. Empires taking great care to mint coins to force their subjects to use them as a means of power projection, as a means of taxation, as a means of controlling all of commerce. If you think about it, you really can't do anything without money of society or our economy, and haven't been able to for hundreds of years. You see that starkly with the fundraising for these Canadian protests. Oh, it's a cause that people believe in, so people can just donate. Well, you can, only if the donation website will let you. Boom, then GoFundMe just seizes the money. Actually, they tried to even donate it to a different charity. Sure, you can try and send it via a Christian website, hit send go. Oh, oops, Canadian government, they're just going to seize all that money. The most idealistic promise of Bitcoin fundamentally is that it is censorship-free money. Through its proof of power on the blockchain and the inability of someone to take it from you without your private keys. In the best case scenario, we'll get to that. And it was born for moments like this. As many people stepped up, they're sending 20 Bitcoin worth nearly $1 million to truckers, along with a variety of other cryptocurrencies, including Ethereum, Solana, and many other coins. But we found out too, with the Bitcoin heist that broke out recently, even in the West, we are free only to a certain extent in the world of cryptocurrency. Just listen to Canada's Deputy Prime Minister lay it all out just so nonchalantly.
So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate, but you're not releasing the information. And the actual follow-up is, I'm just wondering whether the bank accounts will be targeted of individuals who donated to the Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe campaigns. Are they considered designated people under the Emergencies Act, meaning that their credit cards could be cut and financial services are targeting them as well?
Okay, so the names of both individuals and entities, as well as crypto wallets, have been shared by the RCMP with financial institutions, and accounts have been frozen, and more accounts will be frozen. Crowdfunding platforms and payment service providers have started the registration process with FinTrack. In terms of the specifics on whose accounts are being frozen, you now have the regulations. The financial service providers have those regulations as well, and they, working with law enforcement, will be making the operational decisions.
So, for Canada, not only are bank accounts fair game, but crypto wallets themselves, they're being targeted for freezing. In fact, it's not just the government in Canada that's like the Stasi. Ontario residents who hate the protesters jumped into the action and won the first ever case in Canadian history, allowing the government to seize crypto donations worth nearly $1 million. Now, as a crypto advocate in situations like this, it is troubling. It shows you that you are only as free as the government lets you, even when it comes to crypto, especially for people who are buying crypto and storing them with major exchanges like Coinbase or any of these other trading platforms. Unless you're storing your keys in cold storage or on a USB drive, in reality, it is not as censorship resistant as it claims. Now, as my friend Joe Weisenthal writes over at Bloomberg, it is time for Bitcoin to become a better tool for money. Now, that's tongue-in-cheek, as many Bitcoin critics look at it simply as a way to buy drugs online or to practice illicit transactions, but it actually is the opposite. For Bitcoin to be truly a tool to circumvent the powerful and to guarantee a fundamental and private right to transact in the 21st century, it actually does need to become a better and less surveillable tool. Does that mean criminals will use it? Yes, it does. And well, that sucks. But criminals, they use anything at their disposal, including large sums of cash. You don't see people maligning cash that way. Now, something some of you might have observed over the last few years is I've become a little bit more libertarian. It pains me to even say that, given my hatred of many libertarian economic positions, but I'm talking here socially and societally. 2 years ago, before COVID, I would have told you it is imperative that a government not have the full ability to be circumvented by a cryptocurrency, because it would diminish the legitimacy of its power and because dissidents could use it. And now, I'm literally telling you the opposite, for the same reason that I would have been against it years ago, for widespread and full usage that is not able to track. I've watched the workings of the state and supposedly free West be used to crack down now on peaceful protest, a serious issue. Here in the United States, we've seen the COVID regime marshal its way into every aspect of our lives. We've seen the Department of Justice brand angry parents domestic terrorists, and we continue to see the expansion of state surveillance power encroaching closer and closer and closer into the lives of its own citizens. In that environment, I think it's a national emergency that we don't have better ways to circumvent the financial regime. And I'll leave you with this dystopian warning from the Canadian police.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come. It has many different streams, both from a federal financial level, from a provincial licensing level, from a criminal code level, from a municipal breach of court order, breach of court injunction level. It will be a complicated and time-consuming investigation that will go on for a period of time. You have my commitment that investigation will continue, and we will hold people accountable for taking their steps.
We have a lot of work to do to ensure that the state cannot wage financial warfare like that on us. It won't always be pretty, but whatever that is, we cannot allow it here in the United States or for anybody else for that matter. And that's the thing, Crystal. I mean, I know you're skeptical of crypto as well. I mean, look, I get it. Like I said, there's a lot of scammers.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. The link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to mainstream media. PK Beans provides the ingredients for a playful life. We're creating an integrated, holistic children's brand that brings developmental education and entertainment together through
For fucking rude awakening, all fucking people with their mommy and daddy already have as much money as they could possibly want. It's the same as the fucking stock market, penny stocks.
C'est un des mails
Get
les
rich
plus
off penny
emblématiques
stocks.
des
I'm sorry.
États-Unis. Et j'ai nommé bien sûr
Rich off
le
fucking
beurre
stock
à la
market, I think
chèvre,
they're
en
already
anglais,
rich.
le peanut butter, et en France, le beurre de cacao.
Fucking,
Le beurre
Living
d'arachide
the
est
stock
aussi
market years
immensément
ago.
apprécié aux États-Unis dans le fameux
like your-
PBG.
little old ladies that were fucking widowed and were useless, basically like the entirety of my fucking generation, without their husbands. They were like, oh shit, what do I do with life? I don't want to go into retirement. I can't afford a retirement home. My kids don't really fucking give a shit,
un
and
des
they're
meilleurs.
ungrateful, so they won't take care of it. What do you think happens? So some fucking little ladies fucking went to the stock market and made bank and fucking got a place in Cape Cod. And I was like, fucking an old lady can figure it out. I can do that. And fucking, it's just like, you have to invest. You already have to have like fucking, at least like recently. I think I heard most of them were around like $100,000 to $300,000 that they had invested into the stock market. So Yeah, like, and these are people who also have accountants and brokers, and you know, nothing's free. If it seems too good to be true, it is. That's the way it is. And you have to work for the things you want. There's always a catch.
In Bob,
Is the thing. It's like, fuck. Because it must come down.
in Bob's,
Again, everything has a, what do you call it? Reaction.
in bobsleigh,
Yeah, okay. The Canadian Pavilion. Interesting.
Fraud and potential criminal conduct were at the heart of the financial crisis.
More than 4 years later, no one going to jail, no individuals being held accountable. This is totally about what went on in Wall Street. Frontline investigates why no Wall Street executives have gone to jail.
The FBI wasn't aiming high.
There was a definite sense that justice backed off. Did the government fail?
A number of people told us that you didn't make this a top priority. I'm sorry to take that because I made it an incredibly top priority.
So you're telling me that not one executive on Wall Street committed illegal fraud? I just don't believe that.
Because you'd be a fucking idiot.
Although this downturn started in the housing sector and in the financial sector, you're seeing a lot of things.
These numbers suggest job losses are about 600.
In 2009, Wall Street bankers were on the defensive. When a great American mortgage purchased a huge amount of money, the economy was in ruins. Wall Street bankers were being giant bankers admitted they had miscarried. They were also worried that they could be held criminally liable for fraud. With a new administration arriving in Washington, bankers and their attorneys expected investigations, at least some prosecutions.
Figure.
Was there a sense that there were going to be
Your sheets obviously essence.
related to the oil choices?
No, he goes there.
I think people were substantial prosecutions.
No matter whether the Duke would be homeowners, the defrauded the American investor need to be identified, prosecuted, convicted, and thrown in jail.
In Washington, there was broad support.
See, also,
Real insight. Now, what went on Wall Street that brought about the financial crisis not only destroyed the financial, almost destroyed the financial system of the United States, almost destroyed the financial system of the world. Doesn't happen. Yet there isn't something there. Today, more than 4 years since the financial crisis of 2008, there have been no elections of any senior Wall Street executives. The chief of the Human Division of Justice, Manny Brewer, says the problem is that greed is not necessarily criminal. There's some effect on the consent. He says greed such as this paper institution that I call and I'm very upset. That is not the case in your case. It's in your case is that I can prove beyond reasonable doubt every element of it. Some form of prosecution believes that the is a not criminal. Justice Department he never tried to bring together in one program now, laying out the entirety of the story. Against what it means to demand sanctions that the is the story of big banks and enormous fortunes, rules and securities selected for investors originally recorded began to close on the net with mortgage originators.
What my econ one brought up was business goes on cycle.
My name is Michael Wilson. I worked for Countrywide Financial Corporation from 2005 to 2008. They said your goal was world class, Goldman Sachs, etc. And they wanted you to be a researcher.
They did a great job with both things.
My parents once lived inside the bubble at the mortgage originator Countrywide. At first, Winston was impressed with seeing his turned Countrywide into America's #1 mortgage. Just a few months into the job, Winston had an encounter
next to with personalized and with personalized plans said, and I had a conversation with the person nearest the car. Didn't know if it was the owner and he said, oh no, that's interesting. What do you say? What's that means? And he said, that's until Smith Street, 2006. And he said, we will I said, well, for every testing, wouldn't that be? What if the person doesn't have a job? He has no income. He has no assets. He said,
home like 3 different lenders. Countrywide, and I had done all of them.
So what are the standard criteria against which you make lending decisions? And I looked at me, smiled smugly, and said, if they can probably, well, give them
My name is Christopher Cruz. I was a trainer for mortgage loan originators throughout the country. There was a Texas office, and people were silent to me, saying, you wouldn't believe what's happening. You wouldn't believe the loans I was getting approved. They were just flat amazed at what was going through the pipe. These are small books. You know that? Christopher Cruz describes an industry driven to loosen its standards. A man from New York. He got the sense that Wall Street was in control of underwriting standards and not the mortgages. What do you mean? Well, if the underwriting was acceptable for Wall Street, if the underwriting was acceptable to the ratings agencies, that's all that counted. And so my sense is it was probably a game among the people in the mortgage business to say, let's come up with one of the worst loans we could possibly imagine and see if Wall Street will buy it. New homes are selling at the second highest rate on record. And then that type of mentality translates into don't worry about whether the documents are valid. Don't worry about whether we can verify them. Don't worry if the appraisal is any good. Just worry about getting the damn loan closed. Because if you can get that closed, we can get that securitized and then turn around and do another. Don't worry about it. There's too much money out there. Just get the loan closed.
$36 billion in bonuses this year.
This is totally about what went on in Wall Street. Was in fact Wall Street going out in California and saying, hey, just put the mortgage together. Don't worry whether that we're not. You get a fee. I'll take him. I'll sell them off to somebody else. I'll make my money on that. And whatever happens to the mortgages doesn't really matter. Even during the bubble years, the Department of Justice arrested and prosecuted many small mortgage brokers, loan appraisers, and even home buyers. But to go after Wall Street bankers would prove to be much harder.
The Justice Department has guided something like 2,000 to 3,000 people that were making loans.
Right. Rigid, right? Shooting fish in the barrel. What that is.
No bankers. That's surprising.
No, it doesn't surprise me. To prosecute Wall Street, investigators need to find proof of what the bankers knew and what they intended. This meant identifying people on the inside who were willing to talk. I always believed we started the credit front. Go to the credit front, find your credit. Those are the guys we actually don't get the big ones. Are to make sure that loans, the underwriters are legitimate. They actually push the numbers. They're the ones who send the numbers up to the folks who get the big bucks. How do the folks at the top react to those memos? It's what determines whether the bank is one. A big investment bank, the credit department's hired contractors known as due diligence underwriters.
My name is Tom Leonard. I was a due diligence underwriter.
My name is Eileen Loyano, and I was a contract underwriter.
My name is Chico Morton, and I was a due diligence underwriter.
What does a due diligence underwriter do?
The due diligence underwriter assesses the risk of buying loan portfolios. So a company on Wall Street, they're going to buy a loan pool or a portfolio of loans, and we would be hired to go in and take a sample of the loans and review them.
So you're a contract witness,
Yes.
and then what would you do? How would you go about doing the due diligence?
Well, we would travel to the location where the loans were stored and have a room, either a hotel room, conference room, or some workroom where we could set up tables or laptop computers.
So these loans would come in anchored boxes.
Yes. A lot of times we were doing the manual labor, moving boxes of loans back. Loaded all these boxes on vans, drive them to the hotel, into the due diligence underwriters who were working, and that could be stacks all the way up to the ceiling, and there could be anywhere from 10 to 20 separate mortgages within each bank.
30 underwriters crammed at a table, on the shoulders, and sometimes we're in there 6:30, sometimes we're out 10, 11, 12 at night. We've been on jobs where we worked late.
And so what was it like? What was the atmosphere like?
It was like a party. We were all in hotels together, so it was definitely a party atmosphere. We were getting through these loans as quick as we can. They were not being looked at like they should have been looked at.
It wasn't uncommon to have an underwriter on one side of the room start to laugh and say, hey, get a load of this. Here's a guy that's moving from $500 a month rent to a $650,000 house, and he's an electrician, and his wife is a waitress. Everybody in the room laughing. Somebody else would have another.
School teacher making, $10,000. A waitress making, $12,000. You're supposed to exercise some common sense and, say, okay, well, is it reasonable they can make X, Y, Z money? But a lot of times we didn't.
We didn't get the instruction like supervisor here.
Right.
The league would say what?
Looks reasonable to me.
The league would say that waitress making $12,000 a month looks reasonable to me.
Yeah.
You can
Depending on, if it's
what area does a waitress make $12,000?
Las Vegas. If it's Vegas, then possibly tips and all that stuff.
I can't do that. That's pretty high.
Right. It is.
Couldn't say the word fraud because we couldn't prove that it was fraud.
Well, if you saw something that was a misrepresentation,
Yes.
you were expressly told to write fraud, and you should use the word fraud.
All the time. Even if we suspected, we had to say this appears to be incorrect. You would never say this looks fraudulent.
Were you told to ignore loans that you clearly knew contained fraud?
Well, fraud, in the due diligence world, fraud was the F word. We didn't use that.
even if the loan was clearly misleading income loan that made no sense, there was no support,
But you didn't use the word fraud.
but it was.
You saw them by your terms and my terms, yes, it was fraud. By the due diligence terms, it was something else. And it wasn't just outside underwriters who were finding fraud. Insiders at the big banks were finding problems. My name is Richard Bowen. I was with Citigroup, and I was a senior vice president and business chief underwriter in the commercial arena. And the overall operations, including the involved about $90 billion a year of mortgages we were purchasing, home and mortgage.
And what were you to do with those $90 billion worth of mortgages?
I had responsibility to make sure that those mortgages met our credit policy guidelines.
So the bank had agreed on these loans.
Subject to their meeting our credit policy.
You found out that the loans that your team was looking at didn't meet the credit policy.
We found that approximately 60% of the loans did not meet our policy.
60%.
60%, yes.
60% of the loans didn't meet the policy.
Yes, and the volumes increased through 2007. The rate of effective mortgages increased from 60% to excess of 80%.
On November 3rd, 2007, Bowen wrote an email to 4 senior Citibank executives, including board chairman and former Secretary of the Treasury, Robert Rubin. Since mid-2006, I have continually identified breakdowns in internal controls. I must now communicate these concerns. I am deeply distressed.
I actually included in that email myself from the announcement this weekend. He's called me. And in that email, I also requested an outside investigation. And in December, I sent another email. And I said, please contact me. You need to know the details behind this. There are risks to the company.
Just a few months ago, they were giants, and now they need us. There were risks to the entire country. In 2008, highly leveraged banks stuffed with bad loans began to fail. That business is gone.
What did you think when Bear Stearns? I couldn't believe it. I got the whole banking system.
It almost did. Billions drained from the economy overnight. The party was over.
Joe Riley was having a temper tantrum on his show, or he was going off about, why didn't I hear about this? Why didn't somebody tell me about all this that was going on? And almost threw my shoe through the television stuff. And I was screaming and yelling. I did try to let you know. Really, he had been on one of those emails and never received any response.
Taxpayers are still wondering, how did we get ourselves into this economic mess? And is there someone truly to blame?
To help prosecute those who were to blame, President Obama signed a new bill.
4 months ago today, we took office amidst unprecedented economic challenges.
It was designed to amend America's fraud statutes,
Designed the Fraud and Investment Recovery Act.
to make prosecution easier, and also to increase funding for the SEC, the FBI, and the Department of Justice.
Senator Ted Kaufman is a Democrat from Delaware. The man who now holds the seat vacated by Vice President Joe Biden.
Senator Ted Kaufman was a co-sponsor of the bill. He was an unusual senator.
This particular term is up. What are you going to do?
Oh, I'm going to leave. I would never run for office.
Appointed to replace Senator Joe Biden, he had taken no campaign money and was beholden to no lobbyists.
I want to see people who committed such fraud, the advocates caused in this country. Frankly, I want to see them go to jail. Now,
In early 2009, Kaufman joined his colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee to discuss bolstering the FBI and Justice Department's financial crimes units.
I'm going to ask some questions of each of you. My feeling, and Senator Leahy's feeling is that, you know, if you're going to stop crime, the best way is to punish crime. The best way to do that is to put people in jail.
Senators were surprised by how unprepared the government was to investigate bolstering.
The deputy director of the FBI gave incredible testimony.
After 9/11, we moved almost 2,000 criminal investigative resources over to national security matters.
He said what happened was the government had transferred a great deal of the FBI agents over to anti-terrorism, but they didn't replace them. So we're basically down to 200 FBI agents.
We have about 240 agents.
And what he said was essentially during the savings and minimum crisis, there were 1,000 FBI agents who were
Charles Keating, millionaire banker.
After the S&M crisis in the 80s, the government responded forcefully. Back then, the justice convicted over 1,000 bankers, a third of them top executives.
So that often handcuffs to men. You introduced a bill that you believe
In the wake of the financial crisis of 2008,
Seymour enough actually went off
Kaufman wanted the government to respond as it had in the past.
to find them, and if they go to the crimes, they're going to jail.
Why should people hearing you have any confidence that there will be serious investigations and serious penalties to some of the biggest and most powerful people in corporate America?
Trust me, it's going to happen. I saw some.
Kaufman became frontman for the new fraud enforcement bill.
And began giving speeches and writing events about how important it was. You know, we came up with this slogan that, you know, when people rob a bank, they know they're going to go to jail.
If somebody robs a store, they get caught, they go to jail. If somebody robs $100 million, they should go to jail.
When bankers rob people, they should know they're going to go to jail.
And then a big crime, go to jail for big time. These people should go. Lots of people on Wall Street said, what are you doing? You're trying to destroy the banks. There's no crime. We didn't put any crimes. There's no reason to start talking about crimes. Plus, they're very, very fragile. And, you know, something happened. In fact, you start talking about the crime, which was just totally, completely ridiculous.
There was one case already in the pipeline. It had been started in the administration and involved two Bear Stearns hedge fund managers charged with deceiving investors. It was seen as a test case.
Finally, we can see the criminal cases that low evidence determination by the Justice Department to bring to justice those individuals who misled the market, who misled investors, who knowing that an investment was bad, still send.
At first, prosecutors were optimistic.
The knee-jerk reaction in this case was that since people incensed that it was happening, this is a type of prosecution. I think there was that general perception.
So they figured that they have an easy conviction. And, you know, I mean, I think they need to what they're doing. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. They're naive.
It wasn't the strongest case. With no whistleblowers talking, prosecutors had to rely on the interpretation of a few emails. 18 Wall Street defense attorneys went to work.
Well, it's been a fascinating trial.
After a 3-week trial, the government failed to convince a jury that the hedge fund managers were guilty.
Guilty of charges that they.
Were you surprised by the outcome of the Bear Stearns hedge fund managers case?
I was a little surprised, but I wasn't shocked. These are hard cases for them.
Was the Justice Department wrong to go after those two guys?
No, I thought that was a reasonable case for the government to bring. Now, the fact it's a reasonable case to bring doesn't mean it's always win.
The acquittal in that case left many of us feeling empty. There was a definite sense that justice backed off, and that it became terrorist when it came to making the cases that would really affect hard what did happen in the justice.
Senator Kaufman was worried. He wanted to make sure that justice wouldn't shy from the next opportunity. But the money Congress had appropriated would not go to waste.
Ed said to Chairman Leahy, I would like to chair an oversight hearing to ensure that these funds are being spent effectively.
We met with Lady Brewer, who was the head of the pool division. We met with Rob Kazami, who was head of enforcement for the SEC. We met with a senior deputy in the FBI, Joe Perkins.
We sat down and we sort of got down to business, and Ted said, Chairman Leahy has asked me to hold an oversight hearing that will provide me with a public forum to explore, just what you're doing on this front of investigating all people. That is their attention.
They started telling me about this great thing they had out in California, this web to catch the mortgage brokers who had given out the loans. And we made it clear to them, I made it clear to them, absolutely positively, this is not about us. This is totally about what went on in Wall Street. That's what the bill says.
We said, don't just come back here a couple of years from now and say, look at all the small fry we nailed to the wall. We're talking about also investigating senior level people at Wall Street firms, even at the board level.
I think we might have been a little bit concerned at this meeting that the FBI wasn't necessarily at that point. This is now all of 2009 aiming high.
Shortly before the hearing, the Justice Department made an announcement.
President Obama has established the Financial Fraud Enforcement Task Force to investigate and prosecute fraud and financial crime.
This is the value of oversight hearings. A week before our hearing, they also
and we will not hesitate to charges where appropriate.
Somebody had to come to that hearing and talk about what they were doing. And so that was the influence. I convinced them the day I died that the only reason that what task force was announced at that point was because somebody had to go to the hearing.
Last month we saw Turi put two Bear Stearns hedge fund managers. Are there lessons we can learn from that?
A big believer in the jury system, and juries are going to do what juries feel are right. These are tough cases, but we're going to continue to bring them. And it's not in terms at all. We're marching forward.
One of the things that oversight hearings do is it holds folks feet to the fire. We want to get them to say what they could in public, parallel what they had said to us in private.
Why have we seen more prosecutions?
Senator, these are complicated cases. Don't promote that they're not being pursued and investigated from Main Street to Wall Street and beyond. We are focused on that, and we will bring the cases where we can.
Isn't this a bit of fear? I mean, they ask questions.
Well, I thought it was because we were asking tough questions.
If we come back a year from now, after this hearing, how much progress do you think we'll made on
I do think it's sort of I mean, do I wish we had been even more aggressive? Yes. We were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And we felt like, okay, let's sit back and let them do their jobs.
Over the next year, it would be others, not the Justice Department, who put bankers on the witness stand.
We are audited and reviewed and subject, and we have due diligence practice.
What's your due diligence habit?
Beginning in January 2010, the Filing Commission, established and funded by Kaufman's Fraud Enforcement and Recovery Act, held a series of public hearings.
In mortgage underwriting, somehow we just missed, that home prices don't go up forever.
We held 19 public hearings. We reviewed millions of pages of documents, corporate documents, regulatory documents, most of which had never seen the light of day. Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I witnessed business risk practices which made a mockery of city credit policy.
You take an organization like Citi, for example, people involved in due diligence, like Richard Bowen,
Substantial risk of loss
signaled up the line, all the way up to Robert Rubin, that something was wrong. They were finding some 60% of mortgages that they were buying weren't meeting their standards. Mr. Bowen sent you an email.
In August, the Commission asked Citibank's Robert Rubin to respond to Bowen's email.
Did you ever act on that?
Mr. Chairman, I do recollect this. And that either I or somebody else, I truly don't remember, but either I or somebody else sent it to the appropriate place.
Rubin told Angelides that actions were taken to improve the bank's due diligence operations. But his recollections were vague.
I certainly don't remember today, but I knew at the time how I truly
okay. If the excuse at the top was we didn't know, it's a pretty poor excuse from people who are hauling down 10, 20, 30, or in Robert Rubin's case, $115 million.
Mullen was demoted and eventually left the bank. But later, Citigroup admitted wrongdoing in a civil fraud suit for failing to perform basic due diligence between 2004 and 2010. Another focus of the commission was the work of a due diligence company named Clayton Holdings.
You know, one piece of information that we released were documents from Clayton Holdings. He performed due diligence for 24 banks who were buying mortgages from the Countrywise, the Ameriquest, the New Centuries, packaging those loans up and selling them to investors. If you look at those documents, what they show is in each of these banks, Clayton Holdings was finding that a substantial portion of loans did not meet the standards of the bank buying those loans. And bank after bank after bank, they took those loans, they knew they were defective, and notwithstanding that, they never told the investors. In fact, they told investors quite the opposite. So you look at that pattern of behavior, and I think it raises very serious questions about whether this is criminal conduct.
This was among several referrals the commission made to the Justice Department for further investigation. We asked Chief of the Criminal Division, Lenny Brewer, why such referrals hadn't led to charges.
I can't really talk about any specific case, but Phil Hensley is not a very direct and very good conversations. But in reality, in a criminal case, we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, not a preponderance, not 51%, beyond any reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. If we cannot establish that, then we can't bring it to the and we don't get these institutions back. We've brought civil cases, we've brought regulatory cases, and the entire approach here is to have a multi-pronged, comprehensive approach to what gave rise to the financial crisis.
In April 2010, Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein was summoned to the Hill by Senator Carl Levin. This would be the biggest showdown between partners on a major Wall Street bank. Blankfein was unapologetic.
Clients know our activities and they understand what market making is.
You think they know that you think something is a piece of crap when you sell it to them and then bet against it? You think they know that?
The nature of the principal business and market making, what Blankfein argued, was perfectly okay. At the same time we were selling securities to you, we were betting on the fact these securities were going to be down. That's okay because we're a market maker and we're allowed to do that. That's not okay. In the first half of 2007, Goldman Sachs told long position CDOs to its clients, right? We reduced our risk. So you were selling CDOs at the same time you were taking short positions on the same CDOs. The best way of reducing your risk is to sell what you have.
I believe in a free market. It's going to be truly free. It cannot be designed for just a few people. It must be free of deception. It's got to be free of conflicts of interest. It needs a cap on the beat, and it's got to get back on Wall Street. We stand adjourned.
Senator Levin referred his committee's findings to justice, but again, the department declined to bring any criminal charges.
No one goes there, no individual is being held accountable in the other individual.
The Justice Department says these are very difficult cases to bring, showing intent, proving every step of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a difficult thing to do.
I think that is without a doubt a factor in the difficulty of proving intent. I'm sorry, I just don't believe there was another. This doesn't make common sense. And so you're telling me that not one bank, not one executive on Wall Street, not one player in this entire financial crisis committed who would like to fall. I mean, I just don't believe that.
Kaufman and Conniff were running out of patience.
They told us that they felt that you didn't make this on top of it. Well, I'm sorry if they think that because I made it an incredibly top priority. And when we can't bring a case, we have an ethical obligation to bring those cases. But it's not for lack of trying. Our lawyers are working incredibly hard, and it's
it's a disservice for anyone to suggest otherwise.
In all this, was there a case that you thought could have gone forward as a criminal prosecution?
Yeah, there were a lot of discussions along those lines. And I talked to Lenny. I was in the criminal division daily.
Did you argue with him?
Yes. And we would argue this back and forth, and then when we finally came to a decision, sometimes I would be frustrated, sometimes I would be disappointed.
You always accepted the decision
I accepted it
as a professional.
as a professional.
When did you accept it as a citizen?
Well, that's a bit different, because as a citizen, I would hope that something would happen to her somehow, some way.
Frontline spoke to two former high-level Justice Department prosecutors who served in the criminal division under Lenny Brewer. In their opinion, Brewer was overly fearful of losing.
We spoke to a couple of sources from within the criminal division, and they reported that at the King of Wall Street, there were no investigations going on. There were no subpoenas, no document reviews, no public things.
I don't know who you spoke with, because we have looked hard at the very types of matters that you're talking about.
These sources said that at the weekly indictment approval meetings, that there was no case ever mentioned that was even close to indicting Wall Street for financial crimes.
Well, Martin, if you look at what we and the U.S. Attorney community did, I think you have to take a step back. Over the last couple of years, we have convicted Raj Rajawat, so you'll say that's an insider trading case, but it's clearly going after Wall Street.
But it has nothing to do with the financial crisis that packaging bad articles that led to the recession.
Well, first of all, I think that the financial crisis market is multifaceted. And what we've had is a multi-pronged, multifaceted response. It's simply a fiction to say that what crimes were committed, we didn't pursue the cases. And that's why crimes were committed. You have more people in jail today for securities fraud and fraud in the like than ever before.
But no Wall Street executive.
No Wall Street executive.
By September 2010, Senator Kaufman's term was nearing its end. Before leaving, he held a second oversight hearing.
Criminals on Wall Street must be held to account.
Ed decided he wanted to have a second hearing before he left office so that he could question Brewer, Perkins, and Kazami.
We're now nearing the final quarter of 2010 without the sort of prosecutions that I had fully expected we would hope to see by this time.
What was the thinking? I mean, if you can recount any conversations that you had with Senator Kaufman about, let's pull these guys back into the room.
From our perspective, it was a big mystery. We really believed that there was sufficient evidence of fraud. There should have been some cases.
If heads don't roll, nobody makes any change. I'm disappointed that in all of the wrongdoing that went on, all the fraud that went on, that there wasn't an effort to go after a bigger fish. And the evidence shows they went after.
Many times you have very sophisticated parties on both sides.
Mr. Brewer basically kept his testament on the ground.
Everybody battles.
And I was sitting there behind the senator thinking, you're dancing around Central West. Did the department undertake a purposeful, concerted, timely investigation of higher level investment executives?
It's a very complicated cases. There are lots of different issues.
And at that point, I just began to feel like, okay, I feel like I'm being gamed.
They take time. They take the review.
Not only was no one going to be held to account for the financial crisis, but, and I don't say this lightly, no one was being held to account for the failure of the investment in account. I really think this was a stain on the American justice system. And I did not want to be in a conference with that. So I packed my bags on my house and left him on the day Ted Kaufman's term. I mean, I literally was driving down I-95 on the day he left office.
7% increase in
Meanwhile,
lockdowns in Connecticut.
I was actually at a fundraiser in Greenwich, and I met a man running for Congress. And he told me about a documentary filmmaker, Nick Verbitsky, who had been collecting a lot of interviews.
I'm black, so my perspective is black. There's always going to be that little extra seeping it, and this is how it is.
I'm a friendly face that goes by driving, and I'd like to offer you some car insurance. Not because I particularly care about you or your car, but because this is one of the rare products where if you don't buy it, you're doing a crime. So like any superhero, I'm essentially stopping criminals. And I do this by allowing you to give me money for doing nothing. But if you do get into an accident, we at Horton Insurance Heroes promise to maybe pay you some of that money back. Depending on it. We're calling it the Horton Insurance Heroes Protection Plan. Even though protection is not the right word at all, we don't protect you from anything. We just give you back a small portion of the money you were forced to give us. And we do this after something happens for which you could have used actual protection. You're welcome. We're happy to protect you for helping you. Everyone else does. And you have to choose someone, so it might as well be us. If you're not a fan of kind old white men in suits, we've got a wide range of diverse representatives with non-threatening and friendly enough faces who will be there whenever you need to give a company some of your money, which is every month. Or else. If you trust this little lady the most, you can buy it from her. It doesn't matter. She or I or any of us will use every possible excuse to not pay for your accident, even though that's the opposite of the one thing you pay us for. And regardless of whether we do the thing you pay us to do or we don't do the thing you pay us to do, we promise to charge you more money from then on for even mentioning it to us. Essentially, punishing you for using our service, which again, you are legally required to do. But we don't only protect you, we protect your peace of mind. Here's a child that may remind you of your own. And here's a list of unlikely scenarios in which your child could die. If you give us more money, we'll help you out of any of these tragic events if they happen, which they won't, because we've effectively terrified you into never letting anything happen to your child. Ever. You're welcome, kiddo. And thanks for your money, because if you had a choice, I've been never go garage. Hey, thanks for watching. And this, subscribe. And if you have any commercials you'd like us to deconstruct,
Media and we used to do this in the old days, and I think this is really important for us as a national office to do. National Chief has been meeting regularly with First Nation leadership across the country. She's also been meeting a lot with a number of federal ministers over the last few months to discuss priorities going forward. But also, I just want to note that NC has been recognized for her work in the Toronto Star's Vaccine Heroes of 2021. She was one of the 20 people who took on the biggest job of the pandemic and helped Ontario get shots. It was published in December. And most recently, and currently on the newsstand, National Chief was voted to the Maclean's Power List. The 50 Canadians who are forging paths, leading to innovate, and shaping how we think and live. It's actually the current issue that's on the stand right now. So I just wanted to give you that because that's not something a lot of people think about. But to keep up on the events and announcements in our office, please follow National Chief on our social media through Twitter and Facebook. And I just want to go quickly through our agenda. I'm doing the introduction right now. We're looking for like one question and a follow-up for each journalist. And if there's more time, we'll do around two. And maybe we can start by just doing a raised hand system. If you want to ask a question, then I'll go to you for that. But for now, it's National Chief Roseanne Archibald.
Continuously, Roseanne Archibald, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. First, I always want to acknowledge the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. Today, I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded, uncertain territory of Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations. And I want to acknowledge all of you on the territories where you are today. Thank you to my special advisor, Donna Simon, for opening us up in a good way. And I do want to welcome you to my office's first Indigenous Media press conference. As you know, to be in leadership in a time like this is extraordinarily challenging. We are emerging from a global pandemic. We are still in the midst of it with this Omicron. We've been navigating wildfires, flooding. We've had other extreme weather influenced by climate change. We had a federal election, a state of emergency in response to political unrest recently. But above all, we've been collectively grieving the little ones who did not return home from the institutions of assimilation and genocide. And I really want to commend you, all of you, on your dedication and work during these unprecedented times, working to get out information and stories that matter to First Nations people. As National Chief for the AFN, it's my honor to advocate on behalf of our people during this important time in history. I do so every day with what I call a strength-based and heart-centered approach, embodying leadership that's grounded in love and care, as well as holding space for respect in all my interactions. I really want our future generations to look back at this time and see how it was a turning point in history, or as I like to say, history. And I'm really hopeful hopeful about the future. I'm eager to put in the hard work. We have been really working hard during this first part of my term. And I'm also motivated by the momentum that First Nation leaders have built together these past 7 months. Throughout our collective grief and hardships, there comes this hope and an opportunity for fundamental change. And so in the months ahead, I'd like to start in maintaining this open dialogue with you, the Indigenous media particularly. Within my office, we'll soon be circulating a newsletter every quarter. We'll be uploading audio and visual addresses more regularly. And as many of you know, prior to the federal election, my office launched a First Nations priorities document, which we call the Healing Path Forward. And those priorities really offer strategic direction toward positive revolutionary change for First Nations and all communities. And you, of course, can view that document on the AFN website where we talk about those 5 priorities. But part of the Healing Path Forward rests with you as media. You play an important role in how our stories are told. And that's why I want to be connected to you more regularly through these kinds of press conferences, because I want to encourage the culturally appropriate and respectful manner that you have been sharing news with our citizens. You are forthright, and you can deliver unbiased and hard-hitting news while at the same time recognizing how these stories impact First Nations in terms of their mental health and well-being. And I don't think that the non-Indigenous media contemplates that when they formulate their news priorities. The next steps for all of us, including Indigenous media, is to take a trauma-informed approach to news and storytelling. We've witnessed many instances in the last year of survivors and intergenerational trauma survivors being triggered into both hurts. And I believe that the media can be a part of not only bringing these hard stories to light, but illuminating what I call the healing path forward so that our people can continue to survive and learn to fight despite past and ongoing colonization. So I thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to taking any questions that you have. Then enough.
Okay, so let's open it up to anybody have a hand up? We have Brett from APTN.
Hey everybody, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
You see all, National Chief, my question is a fairly timely one. Do you have any indication as to whether the Federal Emergencies Act, which was just invoked, will apply or be used on First Nations people or activists who may be engaged in, protest activity?
They did get a call from Mr. Mark Miller ahead of them invoking the Emergency Measures Act. And we did talk about the purpose of it, which was to deal with the situation in Ottawa around the Freedom Convoy. There are definitely some long-term implications to invoking this act. In the immediate term, there are some, as we know, Indigenous people that are involved in the Freedom Convoy, and they certainly will be impacted in the same way that non-Indigenous protesters will be impacted. I am really concerned, though, about the long-term future of protests and civil actions that First Nations might take, and when is a situation going to be deemed an emergency, and will the government, now that it's utilized this act for non-Indigenous people, quickly act when our people are involved in civil actions or actions or protests in the future? It's something that is on my mind and I'm very concerned about.
Thank you for that answer. That was going to kind of lead into my follow-up there. Some critics say that the invocation of this act here kind of lowers the bar on what constitutes an emergency and perhaps sets a dangerous precedent for the future. Could you elaborate a little bit on how concerned you are and what the concerns are there?
Well, let's look back to the actions in Tyonega in 2020 when the railroad action was happening. Now, we all know that was not a blockade. That was a potential to disrupt the rail service, but there was no actual blockage of the railway at that time. But it was impacting the delivery of goods via rail at that time. And so when that kind of action happens again, will the government quickly, enact the Emergency Measures Act and put people into, what we're seeing right now in Ottawa, people going to court, people being put in jail, bank accounts frozen. I mean, these things they have a long-term impact, and that's my concern is that, First Nations have valid concerns in this country around lands and water, particularly on the land rights. And if they're defending their land rights, where does the government draw the line? I think that, hopefully we can get into situations where we're in positive negotiations around any actions Whereas what I think happened in Ottawa is just a real sense of mayhem and, you know, people going there to overthrow the government in a way which to me is not something that First Nations would call on so much as asking for action on particular political issues. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Brett. Anybody have their hand up right now?
Hi, Jenny, it's Sharon Ryan.
Oh, Sharon?
Sharon Ryan with New Speaker. I can't figure out how to put up my hand.
Okay. Yeah, Sharon, please. Go ahead.
So, National Chief, first of all, congratulations for the McLean's shout out. That's awesome. When you had your conversation with Mark Miller before the enactment of the act, did you express your concerns to him, and what did he say to you?
Yeah, I did express my concerns about the long-term implications, and at that time, we didn't have a lot of time to discuss the long-term impacts, more about what would be happening on the ground in Ottawa and why we felt they needed to enact that particular piece of legislation. So there are going to be more discussions in terms of the long-term impact of the Emergency Measures Act on First Nations in the future. And in fact, it's something that I will likely be discussing with my staff in terms of either writing a letter to the Prime Minister and ministers about our concerns around that. That could be one of the actions that we'll be taking. And certainly, further media releases or statements may be forthcoming as well.
Thank you. And a follow-up, when the graves were uncovered last week near Kamsack, you said you'd like to see Canadians led forward every time graves are uncovered. Mr. Miller's office says government is committed to raising NCTR survivors' flag indefinitely in Parliament Hill. Now, I'm not clear if indefinitely means permanently, but is that good enough for you?
No. I believe that, these are 51 children that we recovered, 215, and Kamloops over 700 and Calais and many more to come. And every time that these recoveries, we need to see some kind of solemn gesture from this government. And it is something that I do request. It hasn't been met, but I'll continue to press for some kind of solemn gesture to recognize every time we do find our children in these unmarked graves. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry. I believe Rick Garrett had his hand up next. Rick?
Yeah, I was going to find out if he has any comments on what Nannis for to vote on the lifting of COVID restrictions in Ontario. I wonder if she wants to speak about what concern she has with that. Like myself, my cousins in Wisconsin State currently have COVID. My nephew there, he's working on the K power line. He's got possibly has COVID, and my brother has COVID or extended facility recently. So I'm wondering if she wants to speak about concerns for First Nation communities about the COVID situation in their communities, even though all these restrictions are.
There's no truer expression of love than a fancy wedding. Or at least that's what I and my peers have convinced you for financial reasons that will soon become clear if they aren't already.
Sorry, are we paying for this time?
Long ago, marriage was strategic, a way to legally bind two families, or to increase one family's land holdings. Today, very few issues can be settled by law to their children with their right to choose a lover. People like me still wanted to make money, so we built the industry around the idea that you should legally bind yourself to the personal who most enjoy having sex. Or failing that, you are most comfortable. Or failing that, anyone you want for basically any reason, including immigration or tax concerns, violence, family. You don't have to, of course, but it's weird, kind of petty. Your parents agree with it. And anyway, can you really put a price on it? Yes, love costs on average $31,500.
Fucking shit! Yeah, same question? We shouldn't have given a kosher option.
Save it for the vows. Is a wedding or an informative short?
We honestly don't know.
Congratulations! You've met the love of your life. What better way to celebrate than by spending several paychecks on a party for so many friends, family members, and people you don't know, but who your parents insist that you invite. You never speak with any of them for longer than 15 seconds. Society has agreed that it would be awful if those in love didn't host a cripplingly expensive event at which your friends and family you have a chance to object if they want, preferably average. In exchange, newlyweds receive money and or presents from a pre-approved list of things you'll need to own in your life as consumers. It's your little way of saying, buy those bowls with one friend from college. In reality, your marriage is an open-air market, facilitating the barter of appliances for booze and a meal. But make no mistake, no one's making money here. Except, of course, those of us in the legal binding of people with vaguely religious undertones industry. Example, you're going to want music at your reception or everyone will be mad. And even though I plugged in the speaker would be fine, we convinced you that you need to spend over $1,000 for a stranger to plug in his iPod instead. This is really DJ Chaz. He doesn't have a degree in anything. He'll play that song that orders the listeners to get louder and softer, then louder again, and so on and so forth in that fashion. If you fail to retain his services, yours will be at Costa Union. These are pleasant-smelling remains of murdered plankton. They cost $2,000 per cartridge. 2 hours after you say, I did. I'd also like to remind everyone that common wisdom states an engagement ring should cost roughly 2 months' salary. And let's not forget about your maid of honor at best man. We don't profit much on that one, outside of charging them an outrageous amount to rent an outfit worn by dozens of people before. Really, we just thought forcing you into picking your favorite friend would be a funny way to add stress to your wedding. You literally have to decide which of your friends is best, then make them write a speech.
Even though it's only my fourth time talking in front of a group, I'm going to tell a wildly inappropriate story about the group. It's intense and private, but society is obligated to reveal it on what is arguably the most important day of his life. In front of me, I'm going to find it charming. But don't worry, everyone.
Add in a choreographed dance, thank you notes, and vows, and you'll soon see your wedding as that expensive party that requires homework. Don't forget, everyone knows you're going to have sex afterwards. They're all fine with it, there's no problem. I'm just pointing out that when anyone smiles at you at your wedding, they're thinking they're going to fuck later. No. She's lived a long, full life. You think she doesn't know what happens on your wedding night, and therefore is probably at least briefly imagined that two of you fucking. Newsflash, she has. Respect the element. I'm Roger, and with the power vested in me by the internet, I now pronounce you husband and fuck you, Amy. Hey, thanks for watching. Oh, if you have any of your own wedding horror stories, please share them. I'll read every single word. I'm Roger. Hello, thieves. It's me, Jack, an older person, or as I like to think of it, one of your many betters. We have a lot of differences, you and I'm sure that I and others like me must seem like aliens or like slower, crankier versions of you. Maybe it'd be better for you if we just quietly faded away into obscurity, so that you don't even have to think of us while you're out there acting like you'll live forever. Would you like that? Well, this isn't about what you like. So just cram it and listen for a second, you entitled little jabronis. I'm here to address some of the more common old people-related complaints I've heard made by you, the future. High-waisted pants are the outfit of choice for old folks, and Joaquin Phoenix in that one movie where he has sex with a phone. We hear you snickering, by the way, when we walk down the streets with our pants pulled roughly up to mid-nipple. You think we're doing it because we're not able, and we haven't updated our wardrobes to reflect modern times. Well, in what will likely prove to be a theme here, you're wrong. We don't wear high-waisted pants because that was the style when we were younger. It's because our bodies change as time goes on. Remember when you were younger and went through terrifying puberty? Your body's not done with you yet. One day your skin and gut and ups are going to go rogue and make a lot of changes, including but not limited to an increase in body fat, up to 30% all around your abdomen. And when that happens, your options will be to wear clothes in the normal fashion, which would highlight all of those embarrassing changes, or to hike your pants up to the goddamn sky and say, "Eat me, nature. My waist is wherever I say it is because I served in a war." Probably. If you've ever been inside your grandparents' house and or dance room, you've probably come across some hard candy. It's the kind of candy that you, as a worthless youth who has never had to do literally anything meaningful with your bare hands, would never spend your money on, because it doesn't have layers of nougat or sour crystal or ice or whatever. Passage for candy in your world. This is the candy of our days, and it serves as a pleasant reminder of the past, when things were better, most likely because you weren't here yet. You probably look at our hard candy bowls and think we lack imagination. But that's just because you don't know anything about science. As you get older, your sense of smell and taste start to fade away, and the subtleties of different tastes tend to get lost completely. As a result, the only tastes old people can truly identify are sour, salty, bitter, and sweet. We don't have room in our mouths for your fancy umami flavors, or anything with a hint of rosemary, or a whisper of lavender. Just the basics. Nature has limited the amount of things I can actually taste. So if I'm going to have something sweet, you can bet your ass I'm going to have the sweetest and most long-lasting candy I can get my mighty bare hands on. An old person sucking on a hard candy isn't an unimaginative caution who's given up on delicacies. It's a person whose taste options are limited, so he's going to suck as much taste as he can. I'm going to squeeze every last ounce of tasteable flavor out of this world. Do you hear me, sugar? You are not safe from me. What? You think we smell? Well, we fine. Okay, fine. The smell we can talk about. You hang around old people and you pick up on a smell, and you assume that at a certain age, old people just start to smell bad. This isn't a natural smell. It's a result of hoarding. The older you get, the less you want to throw things away and let things go. So you hold on to literally everything. We hold on to everything, and then these things start to accumulate smells as they age, and it sort of rubs off on us. Antiques, newspapers, old clothes, photo albums, we're saving them all. You wouldn't know anything about this because all the garbage you hold on to is still new garbage. Even if you've been holding on to something your whole life, that makes it, what, 18, 25 years old? Please. When you smell the collected scent of everything we've been hoarding for our entire lives, you're smelling it from history. You're smelling wars. You're smelling the depression, the real great, because back in our day, even the worst things were still great. This is the biggest stereotype young people believe about old people. You are young and happy, and we're old and miserable because the world has left us behind. Quack, quack, quack. Wrong again. You think we're mad because we don't like your attitude or your music, which is undeniably garbage? Please. We're mad because we're animals, but not just animals. The most not giving a fuckingest animals on the planet. You see, as you get old, your body starts to betray you and fall apart. Things said, your memory, your vision, your hearing, they all start to go. It's like an attack. And what are your options when you get attacked? Fight or flight. Well, old timers, we reach a certain age where flight just gets tossed right out the window as an option. Seniors seem cranky all the time because we are in full-blown fight mode 24/7. I will front absolutely anything that decides to trespass on the metaphorical lawn of my life with everything I've got. You're damned right I'm mad. Nature's trying to say our time is up. Fight my ass, nature, you coward. I'm not done yet. Give me your best shot, turkey. Keep that in mind. Curmudgeons aren't being cranky as a way of saying, oh, the world is different now. It scares me. They're saying to literally everyone all the time, come at me, bro. My name's fucking Jack, by the way. Hey, and make sure you like and subscribe. If you want to watch an even angrier old man explain why the youth is wrong about everything, be sure to check out The Grandfather, starring Hollywood icon Robert De Niro and his pretty boy Zac Efron. Who's everywhere. Click here to see the latest trailer. Finally, feel free to let me know what your favorite candy is in the comments. And I'll feel even freer to ignore you. And it sure tastes like everything's shit.
What are dairy farmers doing for the planet? Canadian dairy farmers.
It's already difficult to keep track of our home network. We have to worry about hackers breaking in, third parties collecting identifiers like IP addresses and locations. But we have at least some semblance of control since the internet has to come in through our modem router, that we can monitor or even firewall. We have to contend with other networks, the one that's a basic part of our mobile network. In spite of the fact that there are dangerous hacks that can allow access to the cell radio and our mobile phone, there's also some semblance of control once again. There's a SIM card. The SIM card determines where we connect. What I will focus on today is a new kind of network, and unlike the two other networks that pass our data, this one is the unknown beast because it can operate without any kind of user control. This one operates without an internet. It allows our devices to work for big tech and not the other way around. It allows for networking slaves. This network allows location control down to centimeters. This network allows for control of devices that are powered off. This network allows for centralized control, possibly in the hands of one man or one AI. Stay right there to learn about the secret network and how it can be received. I'm on the platform Odyssey.com, I'm now one of the top traders on there. Just in case I get the platform, just follow me there using the link in the description. My company has several products like VPN, eGoogle phones, VPN routers, and all of the Racksmail email service. These products are big, protect you from big tech. If you're interested in them, they are on my app, Rackspeed, link in the description. The secret network I'm going to talk about today is the mesh network. I'm going to explain this big level here with this mesh network in several stages. First, I will explain how the mesh network works, but do not rush to leave if you think you know this already, because the second part of this deals with the actual risks of a mesh network. What is a network? When multiple devices interact with each other to communicate, that is called a network. The most ubiquitous network of all, of course, is the internet. Here we have billions of devices communicating with each other around the world and are robust enough to allow for a large enough scale. For example, like the 1.9 gigabyte video stream. The Wi-Fi and cell data networks are two networks designed to send lots of sustained traffic to the internet. The power usage is also very high. There's a new way to propagate traffic over the airwaves, and unlike the other methods of the network, this requires very little power. It achieves this by sending only small chunks of data, and when it is not getting connected to the message, it turns the radio off. It attains reliable communication by having large numbers of listening devices and transmitting signals to these multiple devices at once. The multiple listeners then have the ability to propagate the message by forwarding the message to other devices until one is found to make a connection. Then it can forward the message on to its final big text destination. This kind of network is what I call a mesh network. This, by the way, has nothing to do with the Wi-Fi mesh network sold by Google and others that span directly to Wi-Fi. So don't get confused with how the terminology is used. I'm going to refine the terminology a bit later, but it requires me to discuss the different protocols corresponding to a mesh network. Originally, this mesh network was intended to power the Internet of Things devices, or IoT, in your home. This includes home automation equipment, security systems like cameras and motion detectors, home appliances, and lights. So its heavy use is supposed to be for automating the operations of the building.